So hi, everyone. My name is Marina. I'm a senior service designer here as part of GovDUK, and I'm joined by my colleague, Chris, who's a lead user researcher, and we're here representing a team called the GovDUK Future Thinking team. As you've heard from Mike just now, at least hopefully you heard, GovDUK is the best place to find government services and information. It has become the primary interface between the public and government and plays an invaluable role in helping GDS achieve its mission of making digital government simpler, clearer, and faster for everyone. You've heard from him a little bit about the sheer scale of our operation, how many people we serve, how much content we provide. But it's also important for us to mention the extent to which GovDUK is recognized and used. As you can see from the slide, hopefully, GovDUK's brand fame has reached 100% on YouGov and its popularity 71%, which obviously are very striking figures, which we'll come back to later in the presentation. But what's important for us to remember is that by helping people to do and access the things they need on GovDUK, we can help them improve their experience of, confidence, and participation in government and institutions as a whole. With all this background in mind, we'd now like you to take a step back and think specifically about the people that we serve, and most importantly, the people that we might be failing to reach. Today's talk is about understanding how context can help GovDUK understand its users and potential users. If you're familiar with our current strategy, it's all about growth. And this includes growing its reach to people when and where they need our services. It's about making GovDUK more proactive in helping its audience achieve what they need. And it's about evolving to match people's expectations of government and new technologies. All these goals require us to understand our users deeply and also to proactively think about the future and anticipate, which is precisely where we come in. It's how our team was born. We'd now like to welcome you to our little corner of GovDUK, which is the GovDUK Future Thinking team, but we internally like to call it the greenhouse team. We are a team primarily made up of researchers and designers, and as you can see from our team photo, we take our team branding very seriously. But why did we actually choose that name? Why are we the greenhouse team? Well, in the last so many years, GovDUK and government in general has been operating in a very reactive manner, having to respond to urgent priorities, whether that be Brexit, COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and many, many more. So in this context, we wanted to create a safe space for deep thinking that sort of kept the temperature regulated year-round, sheltered from the changing priorities of the outside world. We also aim to be a team that works in the open, surrounded by glass, so that people can look into our work, feed into our process, and hopefully take away things that are of use back to their specific teams. You will notice that today we're going to be sharing a lot of things that are very early on in their process. They're still in their infancy. And that's because our team is all about sharing the process, not being precious about the final results, and instead seeing value in sharing early and sharing often. Finally, in the context of continuous delivery, we also wanted to create a safe space to plant seeds that might take a little bit longer to bloom. We will discuss this in more detail later on, but at the Greenhouse team, we like to cast our minds further into the future, doing research and design experimentations that anticipate the needs of tomorrow's users. So with all these goals in mind, our mission as a team is to enable GovDUK to think about its current and future users, understand them better, and to anticipate and respond to their changing expectations of government. By now, you're all probably wondering, this is all very nice, but why are we here today? And how does the work of the Greenhouse team relate to today's theme of context? Well, we found that oftentimes when one thinks about users through the lens of government, it's very easy to zoom in and focus on the actions that they're trying to achieve, whether that be getting a driver's license, applying for benefits. And when we think of those things, we often tend to focus on certain variables that we know influence their online journeys. For instance, their age. But what we've come here to remind you all of is that sometimes those variables are a smaller part of their lives than what we might think. And in fact, there are countless other variables, far more nuanced, that are incredibly difficult for government to capture, but that have a direct impact on the lives of our audience. The complexity, individuality, and nuance of each person's context is very difficult to grasp, but it's important for us to be aware of it and remember that government interactions are a very small part of a person's much larger life. If we're going to design services that meet people where they're at, then we need to understand this context and the role that we play in their lives. Understanding this broader landscape can also help us understand our audience better, yes, but it can also help us identify opportunities, unmet needs, and also influence our program strategy. For example, let's say a person is visiting the travel advice pages on gov.uk because they're planning a fun holiday to Argentina. But due to the personal circumstances of someone in their family, they're actually most interested in what the healthcare situation might be like while abroad. If we're to take this broader context into consideration, how might we think of travel advice pages differently? Let's use another example. Let's say there's someone going through a career planning stage in their life, and as part of that moment, they are interested in understanding what the statutory maternity leave policies are and how these should factor into their financial planning. These are two examples that show us how government interaction might be a small step in a much larger journey. And by zooming out, we're actually able to contextualize these interactions and think at a systems level, finding opportunities for connection between pages, content, services, and more.
But what does this mean for us specifically? How does the work of the Greenhouse team relate to context? Well, I'm sure lots of you are familiar with the phases of an agile project. We start with discovery phase, where user research uncovers insights around user needs. This is followed by exploring those various potential ideas in alpha, narrowing the scope and iterating in beta before finally going live across the site. This is a process that our products and service teams follow, and it usually begins with a brief of some sorts that sets the scope of their discovery. Within Greenhouse, we're most interested in what happens in the step before. What are some of the preconceived assumptions that we're starting with? Who are users? And most importantly, who are we excluding and why? In other words, we're interested in understanding the broader context of our users before zooming into the specifics of the services we're designing. In the description for today's event, it says that context is fundamental to the way we come to understand people, situations, and ideas. It's this background information that allows people to make informed decisions. This holds true for our users when interacting with GovUK, but it also holds true of our leadership when making decisions around what GovUK should be focusing on. Going beyond interviews was our starting point for how we could get closer to context by testing alternative methods. On GovUK, our default research methods are often qualitative interviews and usability testing. These methods provide just enough research for our teams to make the next design decision. They're also prescribed in the GovUK service manual. This is the government's blueprint for building digital services. But every method has its limitations and blind spots. While these go-to methods are appropriate for bringing our teams closer to users, some of you might be familiar with this, get your 2 hours of user research time every 6 weeks, and provide many valuable insights that inform service design, they don't always allow us to truly understand the context of users' lives, what they think, feel, and do. As such, it's our goal in Greenhouse to kind of explore a range of alternative research and design methods, which we hope in combination with our usual practices can enrich our understanding of current and potential users of GovUK. So by reaching out to users much earlier in the process, we're helping build a better understanding of users' context, needs, and expectations. And that can later inform our strategy and subsequently the scope of the briefs that we pass on to our product teams. So with all this in mind, we want to showcase 4 methods that we've tried since the team have started. The first method is Lego Serious Play. So this is a co-design method where participants use physical objects to respond to prompts. Because Lego is light-hearted, encourages creativity, and above all is fun to play with, it's actually a great tool that can help people to communicate and share their ideas, emotions, and challenges. Participants are given open prompts to guide them in building Lego models, which they then present back to the facilitator. This method helps to guide the conversation, avoiding leading questions, and can inspire creative new design ideas. It also helps participants to externalize their thoughts, creating some separation between themselves and their experiences, which can be helpful when unpacking more challenging topics.
Next up, we want to share a different method called Postcards from the Future that we actually trialed in the same workshop. This is a method where participants are prompted to write a postcard from a different future to encourage them to think beyond the constraints of today. This method helps us analyze emerging trends, anticipate user expectations of government, and acts as inspiration for designing potential futures for gov.uk. To give a more concrete example of this exercise, in this workshop, we were exploring the life experience of becoming a parent. And we asked our participants to cast their minds 30 years into the future when it was their children that were now becoming parents. We asked them to write a postcard from their children's point of view addressed to them, where they might also mention some of the public services that they were interacting with. From these postcards, we were able to gauge how current parents in today's world struggle with government responsibilities in the early days after birth, particularly when it comes to having to physically present documentation when putting together applications, whether that is applying for a birth certificate, applying for a passport, applying for child benefit. This then served as a starting point for exploration around what government could do to ease the burden in those early days. Are there tasks or even parts of tasks, steps in those tasks that we could take and move them to before childbirth?
Next up, we have adapted ethnography. So ethnography is an immersive research method which involves observation and description of people in their natural setting over a period of time. We adapted this contextual method to a condensed time frame, spending 2 full afternoons at a digital support group for people aged 50 plus. We held unstructured interviews, observed people getting digital support, and even got stuck in with helping community members to do online tasks. The participatory aspect in particular was quite enlightening for colleagues of ours who took part. So sitting alongside and helping someone with low digital skills can really enrich understanding and empathy, and where appropriate, go beyond what you would do with passive observation. Not only this, but this experience helped us build rapport with the community centre and enabled us to return to the digital drop-ins to pilot activities that we later used in other research settings. So by engaging with the same group of users across multiple days, we were able to build a deeper level of trust, which meant that every time we went back, attendees were more open to chatting with us and providing feedback and speaking their minds openly.
Lastly, we want to share with you our work using co-discovery with the Southwark Pensioners Centre. We engaged with this local charity and organized a full-day workshop where their service users could take part in a series of different interactive activities, collaborating with us to explore what gov.uk could do to serve them better. The goal of the day was to envision a more inclusive government, digital services and information, and for us to understand their priorities and how they relate back to our current strategy. An example of an activity that we run was our gov.uk shopping experience. We divided the attendees into small breakout groups and gave each group a set budget that they could then use to buy things from our shop. The different items on the shelves ranged from accessibility improvements like larger font sizes, all the way to different channels like establishing partnerships with local community centres. Then they had to discuss the different options with one another and only prioritize the ideas that they truly felt would help them engage with government online more easily. The constraint of having a fixed budget shared amongst multiple people meant that they had to involve each other in conversation, encouraging participants to discuss the reasoning behind their selections and actively debate to arrive at a group consensus. We later ran the same activity with gov.uk leadership and compared the results. This was obviously an invaluable opportunity for us to spot what were the differences between the two and further opportunities for alignment between user needs and strategy. From testing all these methods, we found that we can get a lot of insight from immersing ourselves in people's natural contexts and meaningfully collaborating with them to envision how we can make gov.uk better. Through these activities, we learned that trying new approaches can help us challenge long-held assumptions about our users and particularly our non-users. It can also unlock creative solutions by thinking beyond the realities of today's constraints. And finally, these methods also help us expand our reach, including underserved groups throughout the process, making our process and thinking more equitable and inclusive. By way of example, at the Southwark Pensioners Forum that we mentioned earlier, we found that although one might assume that most people have at least heard of gov.uk, the reality is that a lot of people in attendance weren't even aware of it. They didn't know it existed or that it could help them achieve your goals. Now I know what you're thinking. Didn't you start off the presentation by showing us this beautiful statistic about the incredibly high recognition rate of gov.uk? Well, this is precisely why immersive research is so important. It can help us question our own assumptions and help contextualize data from other sources. When we say that gov.uk has 100% fame and 71% popularity, what we're actually saying is that to a specific subset of people who are digitally skilled enough to participate in a YouGov survey, these data points remain true. By taking a step back and embedding ourselves in people's natural contexts, we were able to ask ourselves, how are our traditional, sometimes digital-only methods excluding people? How might our data not be taking into account their experiences?
So for us, it's about zooming in closer, but also taking a wide view and zooming out. The immersive methods we've been trialing can help us get close to the micro insights of defined user group within gov.uk's audience, whether they be caregivers, older people, those who are starting a business, or someone becoming a parent. Usually discoveries give us time to establish some context about users' lives and their need states. In time, we believe immersive methods will help our researchers go that bit deeper. But as well as zooming in to deepen our understanding of specific groups, we're also thinking about how we take a more comprehensive population approach as well to ensure we're not missing any groups of potential users. At the moment, we consider population trends in the use of gov.uk based on very broad data sets. For example, we look at sentiment and usage trends among demographic subgroups through gov.uk polling to try and work out which are the underserved groups. We believe we need to kind of take a more nuanced approach to the use of our trend data to help us prioritize and track the impact of our interventions. So this is why the greenhouse is also thinking about gov.uk segmentation. It is a population or macro level approach that we believe will help us understand the opportunities to increase gov.uk adoption and reach among those that are currently not benefiting from gov.uk but could do. We also believe it will help us understand the opportunities to increase engagement of our existing users. So we reckon that a gov.uk segmentation, which identifies distinct population segments or cohorts, can help gov.uk identify and prioritise opportunities in new strategic directions. We also think it can help us evaluate the impact of our ongoing work. This all sounds great. How will we build it? So going back to our earlier slide, where we said the complexity, individuality, and nuance of each user's context is difficult to fully grasp. To address this challenge and build our baseline gov.uk audience segmentation, we are considering which characteristics are most important for gov.uk decision makers when making strategic trade-offs and prioritising opportunities. So at the moment, we're working hard to prioritise the audience characteristics and use cases for the segmentation before we seek a research partner to help us with data collection, analysis, producing the first iteration of the segmentation, some of the things we don't have the capability or frankly, the people in-house to do.
By now, we've walked you through the various ways in which the greenhouse is thinking about context-driven research and design approaches across gov.uk. But what have we actually learned from all this work? What can it inspire moving forward? We've come to find that in order to make informed decisions that answer the needs of our users, we need a multi-pronged approach. The broader the range of data sources and research methods that we employ, the deeper into the context of our users that we'll be able to get, and the better we'll be able to understand how to serve them. It is crucial to triangulate data and insights so that we can get a fuller picture and prioritize those underserved groups that can be most positively impacted by our interventions. Furthermore, thinking contextually also allows us to embed our designs into this context. The type of work inspires us to prioritize future thinking. You might remember that early in the presentation, I mentioned that at the greenhouse, we're thinking further down the line. Well, we're using tools such as speculative design that can help us envision a future where gov.uk moves away from more surgical design updates to a more holistic contextual framing of our services. For instance, our early research focused on 3 specific life experiences: becoming a parent, developing a disability or health condition later in life, or experiencing financial hardship. After going deep into each of these subgroups, we analyzed them collectively and arrived at a set of common insights, including how a lot of folks don't understand what they're eligible for, sometimes going as far as not even knowing what things are available to them in the first place. It also pointed to the need for contextual and timely support that meets people where they're at instead of expecting them to come to us. And finally, there's an expectation of a two-way conversation with government, where we're a bit more proactive and reach out to our users and engage them in a relevant manner. Based on all these insights, we went back to the drawing board and held ideation sessions where we encouraged participants to think beyond the constraints of our existing site and ask themselves, if anything was possible, how would gov.uk respond to these user needs? And that's where, once again, context became invaluable. When thinking about meeting users where they're at and helping them understand the support they're entitled to, we were able to place ourselves within that much larger narrative. Let's take the example of becoming a parent, for instance. What if we were able to intercept expectant parents in spaces that they already inhabit, where we know they are preparing for this life experience beyond the scope of just their government responsibilities? Here you can see a mock-up of what it might look like if gov.uk were to, for instance, expand into Pinterest, a platform that we know parents are already using to, for instance, dream up of their nurseries. Similarly, what if gov.uk were to tap into the existing networks of support present in users' context to help bring their eligibility to light? If you look to the left, you'll see a mock-up showing a future where gov.uk makes use of vacant retail spaces or partners up with local community centers to host in-person eligibility clinics. Now, I know what you're thinking. That is a lot of investment and very far from what we're doing today. But the truth is, having some explorations that are that far into the future can actually spark interventions that are a lot more realistic, like the one that you might see to the left, sorry, I'm getting my sides confused, to the right. So for instance, if you look over here, you can see a share with a friend scheme. What if something so small and simple, almost surgical, like creating that button over there, could all of a sudden tap into people's support networks and enable those with higher digital literacy that are already engaging with gov.uk to signpost to others the right resources that might be available to them? It's still early days for the greenhouse. A lot of the work that we've shared today is in its infancy. It's very green. And we have a lot more effort being funneled into these spaces, whether that be segmentation or the design explorations as early as this week. But if there's one thing that we've learned from this journey already, is the value of thinking of our work within a broader context. The more we zoom out, the better we are able to understand our users and how we as gov.uk fit into a much larger narrative of their lives. Otherwise, you might just miss some important details and make decisions based on assumptions that fail to capture the bigger picture.
Excellent work. And we have a couple of questions that come in. Incredible work, GovUK Future Thinking. This was from Dan. How do you get management to invest in the concept, e.g. other government departments, where there's relentless delivery focus?
Can I have a go at that one? I would say it's like showing the value as you go. So some of this work is quite big and ambitious, and you're not in the first quarter of doing this stuff going to deliver results necessarily. I think a lot of what we try and do is understand and play back the challenges we have internally for making decisions, because there's a lot of things GovUK could do, but we have constraints as an organisation, as you kind of expect. So that it's really being open and honest about what we're trying to achieve. It's being quite transparent in like the challenges we have at the moment, particularly understanding data about people, getting the right data at the right point in decision making. This is really hard stuff, and it's being open with our leaders about what do they need at the right point to decide to do things. But we find the best approach is doing stuff like this, just being really open, sharing the thinking, sharing what we know, probably inviting challenge early as well, and working out what we can build on as well already. Yeah, and if I can add two more things to that, I think any work that we've done to disprove assumptions has been really powerful, because if we find that management is making decisions on data that's incomplete, that is obviously putting them on the spot as well. So being able to show how we're helping them understand and make decisions in a more informed way has been really powerful. And I would say the second thing is that, of course, a lot of our thinking is quite out there, but when we find ways of linking it back to work that teams are specifically doing, that's also quite powerful. So for instance, we didn't show it today, but when we were doing research into becoming a parent, one of our insights led us to develop a quick prototype of what it would look like if gov.uk were on WhatsApp. What would it look like if it was a two-way conversation where people were getting information, but also able to engage back? Obviously, we didn't move forward with that idea, but we do have internal teams that are now exploring what would it look like if we had an AI chatbot that could operate on WhatsApp. So it's something that sort of started in some of this space and then got extrapolated and developed further through other teams. So I think about connecting back to the specific work already happening has been quite powerful.
Cool. Maybe one last question. We have a question that is, what was the timeline for the end-to-end process of finding extensives? How long does it take from greenhouse being dreamt up to work on it?
So greenhouse, I'm taking this one because I've been
Yeah.
around since the beginning. Greenhouse started a little less than a year ago. And obviously we have morphed and changed. When we started, we were a very small team. There are about 3 of us. And now we've grown to be a team of about 8 people involved in this work. So a lot of it has been as a result of capacity and our external partners. You've seen that we've collaborated with community centers, with charities, with other people's timelines as well. But I would say that all in all, it's probably like the overall research to get to the commonalities across life experiences did take, I would say, a couple months.
Cool. We've got a bit of compressed questions a little bit to make up for the tech gap, but if people wanted to continue the conversation with you.
Absolutely, yeah. People feel free to come forward and chat to us, reach out directly. We've been added on LinkedIn and stuff, so we invite input, we invite questions about the work, and also what you'd like to know more about.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.